Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Valentine's Day Coffee House. It's wonderful to be with you here today on this day, and I'm certainly looking forward to our presentation with Madeleine Charney. I'm looking forward to this, and I welcome you, and I'm glad that you're here. It's always a pleasure to serve our community in this way. And Brian, I'll hand the coffee house over to you.
Well, thank you, Megan, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I love the picture, Cornelia, thank you. Yes, it's so wonderful to be creating, collaborating, and connecting with all of you. That is the mission and purpose of why we show up to this every week and why we're always seeking out valued members of our community to share their passions, their expertise, their thoughts, their souls, their missions and purposes with all of us. And we're very excited today. We have a local friend and a local advocate for Mother Earth that is going to be sharing with you all today. And we really loved the idea of creating a Valentine's Day coffee house where we all have the opportunity to make Mother Earth our date. So to really fall in love with the earth and fall in love with the mother of us all. And I'm just so excited for Madeleine Charney. She really is more than an advocate. She's an incredible presence in the world of green living and the earth. She has been an academic librarian in Massachusetts for 30 years. She holds a degree from Conway School of Landscape Design. She actually helped launch the Western Massachusetts Regenerative Food System, which is a part of the whole Northeast vision for healthy people, food, soil, and the climate. She does have published works that include co-edited books on international green libraries and mindfulness for librarians. So I'm so excited, Madeleine. I'm really going to sit back and enjoy and learn. So without further ado, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to light a candle so we can enter a kind of ceremonial space. Take a couple of breaths and find ourselves today arriving. And I want to thank Russell, who stood up after we showed Kiss the Ground, an outdoor screening of a really powerful documentary about our connection to soil and health. And Russell, you gave this impassioned speech. And I said, who is that? And then sure enough, you got in touch and invited me to give a talk, and here we are. So I'm going to share my screen and tell you something of my own story of how I come to this work, because people are often baffled. They're like, a librarian and food, and like, I just don't get it. So I will explain my journey, and then I really want to show you this incredible network that's emerging around the Northeast and invite you to learn more with us. And I'll take questions in the last 10 minutes. So here we begin. And I made up a title for myself for talks like this. I call myself the labyrinth loving librarian for the land. I love labyrinths. If you're not familiar, you don't get lost in a labyrinth. It's not a maze. There's one path in and one path out. And I think of us on a labyrinthine journey right now, especially in these uncertain times. The idea is you stay the course. We don't know exactly where we're going, but we're all on a path together. And sometimes we feel far away from our destination of, let's say, restorativeness. And sometimes you feel close. So just being on that journey together. And if anybody ever wants to talk more offline with me about labyrinths, I would love that. And before we begin, I'd like to do a brief land acknowledgement, and that is just to honor that I'm in Amherst, Massachusetts, and that is unceded territory of the Nonotuck people. And the neighboring indigenous nations where I'm sitting right now are the Nipmuc and Wampanoag to the east, the Mohican and Pequot to the south, the Mohican and the Abenaki to the north. And I'm going to talk a lot about our indigenous neighbors in this short time together, which is an important part of understanding our foodways. So when I talk about foodways and food systems, you don't have to get all the details on that pretty complex chart, but understanding there's many, many systems at play inside our food systems: biology, economies, social systems, politics, supply, demand. I mean, it's a really complex story that I'm trying to talk about today. I'm going to talk about pieces of it, but really fundamentally, it's about the soil and the incredible microorganisms that make soil possible, that make healthy food possible. And you can read all the elements there, including and I think I've got this right, actinomycetes. Actinomycetes are the last things that create the mycelial networks. And when we talk about regenerative agriculture, that's what you want to keep intact, are those mycelium. When we till the soil, we break that up and we break the nutritional webs and release the carbon in the air. By keeping things low or no till, which I'll talk about, we sequester the carbon and retain the fertility of the soil. And I'll get into that a little bit more. And if we don't take care of our soil, where there is monocropping, as you see on the bottom left, spraying of poisons on our food. And what really keeps me up at night is this idea, what's happening really is major supermarkets, conglomerates taking over our food systems and turning our foodways into sterile systems. This is what I am working to push back against. And with all of you and everybody growing our awareness of really taking care of the land, the sacred land, shopping locally, eating healthy, making that affordable and accessible to everybody. This is the work that I see very much needed. So let me tell you about, and also I was like making a point that that's really heartbreaking to me, all of those poisons and sterility. So let me tell you a little bit more about where I'm coming from. As I said, sometimes it doesn't quite add up how someone from my vocation would wind up doing this kind of activism. So here's my story. I grew up on Long Island in the 1970s. We were an odd family because nobody else in our neighborhood had solar panels. My father actually was a solar panel salesperson, aside from being a high school earth science teacher. So we were 5 in my family. There's my dad, or a depiction of him saying, "We will study all about the earth." And we had a pop-up camper, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner. And because both my parents were teachers, they had the whole summer off and they took us all over the country. Every summer of my growing up, we were sometimes out for up to 7 weeks at a time. The 5 of us squished into that little trailer and going to all the national parks. Just very, very formative for me. And we also had a compost pile, which the neighbors thought, like, that is weird. Why are they throwing their garbage in a pile in the yard? We were, not your typical Long Island family, thankfully. And we're also Jewish, which has a very deep agricultural tradition as part of our practices, which I'll also talk about a little bit in my story. So I went to college in upstate New York, and in 1988, I was like, what do you do with an English degree? I think I'll pack a little suitcase, get on a bus, and go to this place I heard about called Amherst and take a little break while I decide what to do with my life. And I literally didn't know a single soul. Looking back, I thought, gee, that was brave of me to just go off and find a new life. So I landed in Amherst, and I like to show the context of where I am in the watershed. So for people not familiar with New England, you can see I'm in the Connecticut River Valley. In the Abenaki language, that's the Connecticut, and I'll talk about our Abenaki neighbors. And you can see Long Island down on the southern end. That's where I had come from, where my family raised me. Not too far away, about 3.5 hours. So I realized that I was ready to go to graduate school, and I got my degree in 1991 when things were traditional, books and reading and talking to people face to face, and I really, really loved it in the early 90s. And then as technology started to weigh on me more and more and more, I started to super burn out, which is that middle image. And I was just like, I got to get a break. So I quit my job, even though it was like a steady state job. People thought I was like, is she like going off the rails here? And I went to Israel for 4 months. And I did a green apprenticeship at a wonderful ecological kibbutz called Kibbutz Lotan. It's open for anybody. They have a wonderful tourism industry also, so you can go and stay there and learn about the green buildings that they create and the organic farming. And I just sunk into the desert life. It was very healing for me, and I reassessed my life. And what I decided when I was there was I wanted to go back to school. So I came back to the US, and in Conway, Massachusetts was a little school called the Conway School of Landscape Design. And again, people are like, what is the connection? Why do you go from a library degree to a landscape design degree? I was like, it makes perfect sense to me. It's all about systems and how systems interact and how people work together inside those systems. And it really was an incredible accelerated year. It's a master's program. They're in Northampton now, and I definitely encourage people to check out the program. It's a very hands-on experience. We were out in the field a lot, like that was our classroom. And it was just a blessed year of thinking about parks and schools and forests and rivers, and it was just an incredible, like, eye-opening experience. I've never seen the world the same since I graduated from the Conway School. Then shortly after graduating, I started to work in Belchertown at the New England Small Farm Institute right here up the road from Amherst, and they have what is considered the best agriculture library in the Northeast. So I went back to my library roots, but this time with a very specific focus on food and farming and natural systems. And I was the solo librarian there. And it was just such a gas being in a place where in the middle of a work meeting, someone would leap up and say, we have to check on the piglets. And we'd all rush out, and, there was like chickens running in the yard and foxes chasing them. It was like a very interesting library job. So what I do now, I got hired at UMass in 2004. On the left-hand side, you can see that I have these subject specialties, which you could now understand makes sense. So I help people with research. I help the whole community. Even you all could call on me because we're a public institution. But on the right-hand side, this is why I love my job, and frankly, why I can handle all the technology again, is because I get to do a lot of community work as part of my job. And one of them is this Western Mass regenerative food system. So I know this is a big jumble when you first look at it, but just like Brian said, the vision is across the Northeast to have 30% of our food grown and consumed with regenerative practices. So Western Mass is already, like you'll see, I'm going to show you, we're really emerging quickly. So has Southern Vermont and the Hudson Valley. And then the vision, of course, is Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Maine. And we just hired this wonderful person named Hannah McDonald through Northeast Organic Farming Association in Massachusetts. And she's coordinating the Western Mass piece of this vision. So what is regenerative agriculture? It's actually hotly debated. I'm starting with the human part of it. So it's really about honoring our sacred land and really thinking about the people, the workers, the Black, Indigenous, people of color that need access to land. If you don't know our country's story, Black people were promised land when they were emancipated, and they're through many discriminating and violent acts and regulations and laws. There, I think we only have, like, of all the US farmers, I think like 4% are Black, and it's not by choice. So it's bringing access to land for BIPOC neighbors. It's about dignified access to food and collective ownership in as many cases as possible. And then back to the environmental piece, like I said, it's keeping the tilling down, rotating crops, not having bare soil, rotating animals, and having a diversity of crops, right? Not that monocropping we saw in that earlier image, which is very damaging. And I want to give a special honoring to the Wampanoag chief, who was a woman named Wetamu. We often hear about her brother-in-law, King Philip, who was Metacom. I had never heard of her, and I am so horrified that her story has largely been erased. So I'm bringing your awareness to her incredible power that she wielded with great responsibility with her brother-in-law. And she was killed in 1676 by the colonists in the King Philip's War. If you would like to learn more, join me in reading Our Beloved Kin by Lisa Brooks. She's a professor at Amherst College right here in my town. And I'm only partway in, and it's really like completely like changing my understanding of what happened with the colonists and our indigenous neighbors. And when the colonists came, their practices around growing food were so different. While the native people on the right had their food was woven into the landscape, they would walk by the English gardens and say, now that's strange. They're in neat little rows with fences around them. And it was just a very different way of thinking about food and raising food. And the colonists would see what looked to them like just bare open land and say, oh, there's a great place to graze my livestock. And the native people were using that land. They were rotating it in. They were burning to promote fertility. And there was this encroachment of livestock. And that was, I'm learning, sort of like the most riled up pieces of their conflicts was livestock going into what looked to them like just open, free land, which the native people were depending on. So I want to talk about, I'm going to go back for a minute. A lot of us are drawn to native practices because they are so alive. But what I want to invite people to think about is like, who are your kin and where's the land that you come from? So I mentioned that I come from a Jewish family, and we actually have practices that are very, very land-based. And I'm very excited to be learning more and more these days about Rebbe Nachman of Bretzlav, who invites us to go out into the fields and really talk basically to and with nature and with our source of life. So here's a quote from Reb Nachman: to go outdoors every day among the growing things and enter into prayer in your own language. So if it's whatever language, that's how you're going to feel the closest to your source, according to his way of thinking. And he calls this practice hitbodedut, which is the Hebrew word. And the other thing is, as a Jewish person, we pause before we eat particular foods. And there's a special prayer if it comes from a vine, if it comes from a plant, that's from the earth, if it comes from a tree, if it's a grain. So these are practices that I have been embracing more and more in my own life, and really getting in touch with it as my own land-based tradition. And I just want to wrap up by making another pitch to watch Kiss the Ground. It's a documentary. It also is more than just a film, it's a whole movement, and you can actually get trained to be a soil advocate. And while I really, really appreciate it, it's also a very white-centered film, and the filmmakers are actually revisiting that. And I've heard a rumor that they're going to actually like release an updated version that's has more diverse voices. I also want to recommend the documentary Gather, which is about native foodways. It's a beautiful film, so they might complement for you. And then finally, I want to just end here, going back to this Western Mass regenerative food system. We recently decided that it made sense to govern ourselves with a system called sociocracy. This is an international movement that was started in the Netherlands. And I know this also looks pretty complex, but what's exciting is that when we have our circle meetings, these, instead of like committees where there's like a chair and somebody talks a lot and everybody listens and you might or might not talk, sociocracy uses rounds. Every person sitting in that room is invited in an order to speak, like a council. And you can always say pass if you're not prepared or you're not comfortable. There's no pressure, but everybody is brought into the circle immediately. So getting back to this idea of honoring a diverse group when we're talking about food systems. And we're hoping that this will invite more people of color into our work, and that it will be just a very inviting structure. Every circle that you see is double linked. So there's a delegate in between the main circle and each of the subject areas. And the purpose circle is like what you might think of as a steering committee, but also works in this very, very democratic way. So I encourage you to look up Sociocracy for All. And it happens to be that two of the leading experts live right here in Amherst as well, Ted Rao and Jerry Koch Gonzalez. And I've done some training with them, and they're really, really inspiring people to think very closely to the way you run meetings, and that everybody's heard, and that decisions are made by consent and not consensus. With consensus, it's like yes or no. And if it's no, too bad for all the people that lost the vote, just live with it. Consent helps you go through these iterative processes where everybody gets a chance to share questions, concerns. You work through the concerns. You might amend the proposal and arrive at something that people feel great about, or like, okay, not perfect, but like I can live with that. It's good enough for now, safe enough to try. Let's move into action. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm noticing it's time for me to take questions. So I will just leave you with some food for thought. And then the last slide, I give cite all of my images. So you know that I was respecting all the people that made those beautiful images available on the internet. And now I'm open for questions.
Well, thank you so much, Madeleine. If you wouldn't mind just taking it off of screen share, just so that we can see everyone, it'll be a little, thank you so much. And that was really, I don't know if anyone noticed, but I was like pressed up against the screen. I was like totally just engaged, and the wheels were turning the whole time. Like, this is something that needs to be duplicated and repeated. And Madeleine, I'm just a bit in awe. I'm exceptionally grateful to you for being an advocate and being a leader in this realm, because it needs to happen. It's not like a casual thing. This is, you know, if not the most important, other than, you know, people treating each other kindly, you know, it's right up there. This needs to be a focus. So just thank you for creating the vision and getting into the details of how we can all participate. Thank you so, so much. So cheers to you. And please just start waving at me and I'd be happy to, oh, I know who I'm going to first. Miss Green Village Green, Carol, go for it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're good to go.
You knew I'd be asking questions. Madeleine, that was so interesting. I have a garden that has been fallow at least 35 years. So I am digging up Japanese honeysuckle roots, and I am digging up nasty, strangly vines. And I am winning, but I'm having to really dig down and get rid of this stuff, and bamboo from next door, which is driving me nuts. And I'm putting in raised beds. I'm doing hugelkultur. I am trying to do as much permaculture as possible. How can I do this without disturbing the ground, which once I've disturbed it, I'm not going to disturb it again, but I've got to dig down quite far to get some of these nasty things out of the garden. So help.
Well, okay, gardening advice. I put my email in because this is a longer conversation. I'd love to have Carol. Sometimes you do have to dig to get stuff out. I mean, when it's been so many years, when there's such pernicious kinds of things, you could also try to do like major smothering with in natural ways with cardboard, and then planting in like lasagna gardening. You've probably heard of that might work, but it kind of depends on the species. So I'm glad you're doing it. That's the main thing. And get help. Be careful of your back. But really be in touch, Carol, because I'd be happy to talk more about that.
Yeah, you two definitely need to get together because Carol has been an advocate in that world for a long, long time as well. And I know you guys will just fall in love with each other. I just want to acknowledge Carol Patty. I don't know if everyone can see her, but she's got some Valentine's Day glasses. And I just want to say, hi, Carol, we love you. And I love the glasses.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's to all.
Happy Valentine's. All right, who else? Cornelia, go for it.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. That was awesome. I love systems thinkers. I'm a systems thinker and not necessarily sustainable gardening and the soil and sustainable agriculture, but I'm more in health and healing, but that is very close to how we live and how we feed the soil and how we treat the soil. So thank you so much. We in Minnesota here have an organization called North Country Food Alliance. Have you heard of them? Yeah, they make they create community gardens. They bring organic foods into neighborhoods, into poor neighborhoods, and make it available for the community. They are a really great organization that advocates for organic food for everybody. So I just want to say, get in touch with them or look them up, maybe. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cornelia.
Thank you, Cornelia. Yes, it's all about connections. All right, Russell, go for it.
Thank you, Brian. So four quick points. Number one, Madeleine, that was awesome. And thank you so much for grounding our coffee house in really the most important thing, bringing this, here we are, the Center for Functional Nutrition, and it's taken all this time to get a presentation that really is at the root of everything that we do and everything that we stand for, and just can't wait for future collaboration. I just felt so at home with everything that you shared, so thank you for that. Second point is, we hear all the time about probiotics, and it's true that the gut bacteria is absolutely critical for health. And I just wanted to point out that for thousands of years, people got their probiotics by eating organic food that came from the soil from no-till agriculture, where the mycelium was still intact, and they always had little bits of soil on their carrots or turnips or food, and that's where they got their bacteria. People were literally ingesting soil bacteria, and that was the original probiotics and still is. Third quick thing is in the writing of my first book, 2006, I was very focused, of course, on trying to get out a certain message. And one little phrase that came through I just wanted to share is this: food is the soil from which the tree of our own life is grown. Food is the soil from which the tree of our own life is grown. And lastly, fourth point, Madeleine, when you were sharing in the very beginning and talking about the mycelium, I wrote in my notes, quote, maintain the mycelium. Maintain the mycelium. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Russell. All awesome points, and so true that that's what I was feeling, Madeleine, just that this needs to happen more, and I have a feeling that it will. So just awesome. I know that Carolyn, go for it. You're next.
Thanks, Brian. Madeleine, that was absolutely wonderful. I loved your story. I grew up, my grandparents had a beautiful farm, and we raised all of our potatoes, vegetables, everything, and just, you know, really had a love for the land and our food. And then, you know, when everything set in around the fast food era and everything going on there, I feel like those beginning roots helped me stay really connected to understanding the food and the importance it plays. And then I would just say over the last few years, I've been able to really circle back to that. So I just really enjoyed your presentation. And Carol and I live in the same city, and so I get to contribute to her compost pile about every couple of weeks. And that just makes me feel so good, because I'm not in a place right now to have my own compost. So it makes me feel good that I'm not putting all of that, you know, in the trash or down the drain or whatever. And so just trying to minimize our, you know, footprint, so to speak. And then also wanting to share that I share the love of labyrinths with you. I've led like several labyrinth exercises on retreats. And I actually had the pleasure about, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, with a couple of my community members, and we actually built one up at a retreat center. And that was just one of the most magical, I mean, it was hard work, but it was one of the most magical experiences. And the owners of the retreat center, you know, just email us periodically to tell me how much that labyrinth continues to bless people and their groups. So I totally love, I'm totally with you on that. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. And I hope that the labyrinth you built is on the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator, which is an incredible database if you want to find a labyrinth near you or when you're on a trip. Okay. Labyrinths are on every continent in the world except for Antarctica. So if you're not in there, you can make a request to be put onto the database.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I will do that.
Yeah.
How do I find that?
Just Google Worldwide Labyrinth Locator.
Okay, I'll do it. Thank you.
I'm glad I mentioned that in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you, Carolyn. Such good points. Community, I love it. Anyone else waving at me that I missed? I think we are good. So again, Madeleine, just thank you so much. I just really, this was meant to be, and I know it's just a start. And I just really am so grateful that you're spearheading it. I learned a lot today, and I can already see the connections happening. So just thank you so much. And happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Again, this is such a incredible opportunity for us to come together. I see you, Pat. Thank you. for us to connect, collaborate, create together. It's such a profound connection that we all have. And I would love for us all to enjoy my mom, Megan, who is going to share with us the good news today and leave you all with an open heart and just incredible energy to go out into your lives. And for those of you that have a loved one to just cherish today, make that really special for them and make it really special for everybody. And don't forget about the earth. Make it special for the earth today too. So thank you so much. And Megan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Madeleine. When Brian told me that you were going to present on February the 14th, I thought, well, that's absolutely perfect. And then I thought that I would really love to share some poems with you. Some poems from Mary Oliver. Mary Oliver passed away January 17th of 2019. But she's one of my favorite poets. And last year for my birthday, Russell gave me this book. It's by Mary Oliver, and it's called Devotions, and it's a collection of all of her works. And this past January, I decided that I was going to read this book from cover to cover. I'd never read a library book, a poetry book like that before. And it's been quite significant, and it's been an experience that I really enjoyed. So Mary Oliver also received the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1984 for her poetry book, American Primitive. So I'm going to read you four poems from her book, and then I'm going to share one other short poems with her. And the first poem, and this is really a privilege for me and an honor for me to be able to share these poems with you. And the first poem is called, I Happen to Be Standing. I don't know where prayers go or what they do. Do cats pray while they sleep, half asleep in the sun? Does the opossum pray as it crosses the street? The sunflowers, the old black oak growing older every year? I know I can walk through the world along the shore or under the trees with my mind filled with things of little importance, in full attendance. A condition I can't really call being alive. Is a prayer a gift or a petition, or does it matter? The sunflowers blaze, maybe that's their way. Maybe the cats are sound asleep. Maybe not. While I was thinking this, I happened to be standing just outside my door with my notebook open, which is the way I begin every morning. Then a wren in the privet began to sing. He was positively drenched in enthusiasm. I don't know why, and yet, why not? I wouldn't persuade you from whatever you believe or whatever you don't. That's your business. But I thought of the wren singing. What could this be if it isn't a prayer? So I just listened, my pen in the air. Praying. It doesn't have to be a blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot, or a few small stones. Just pay attention, then patch a few words together, and don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but a doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak. At Blackwater Pond. At Blackwater Pond, the tossed waters have settled after a night of rain. I dip my cupped hands. I drink time. It tastes like stone, leaves, fire. It falls cold into my body, waking the bones. I hear them deep inside me, whispering, oh, what is that beautiful thing that just happened? And lastly, I'd like to share with you a poem by Anna Akhmatova. She's a Russian poet. She's one of the most significant Russian poets of the 20th century, and she was shortlisted for the Nobel Prize in 1965. And it's called A Land Not Mine. A land not mine. A land not mine, still forever memorable, the waters of its ocean chill and fresh. Sand on the bottom whiter than chalk, and the air drunk like wine. Late sun lays bare the rosy limbs of the pine trees. Sunset in the ethereal waves. I cannot tell if the day is ending, or the world, or if the secret of secrets is inside me again. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Megan.
Absolutely profound, beautiful. Thank you, Madeleine. Thank you, everybody, for just connecting, locking arms, sharing love. Go out today and give that to somebody. Just give it, give it, give it, give it. And let's continue to create, collaborate, connect. And I wish you all a very happy, joyous, and love-filled Valentine's. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Great way to start the day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Madeline.
Thanks.